The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor, your host. And I've got a lot to share today. First of all, this week is going to be my son's 20th birthday. So I wish him nothing but success and happiness. Live long and prosper. Today is the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, where Jewish people around the world will celebrate a new year. And before I go into what that means, I'd like to get on my soapbox and share my view of religion. I know religion's a taboo subject, but hear me out here. I look at life as a mountain, and God is at the top of the mountain. On one face, you've got Christians. On another face of the mountain, you've got Jews. On another face, you've got Muslims, Buddhists, Hinduism. Name a religion. Atheists, agnostics who might not share the same belief. I get it. And we're all trying to climb the mountain. Now, on my face of the mountain, it might be wooded. On another face of the mountain, it might be snow-covered. On another face, it might be rocky. So each person has their own individual journey with their own individual path, and we're really all trying to be good people. And that's my view on religion. So with that, may you be inscribed in the book of life for another year. Getting to the show content, I am both elated and pissed off. So let's start positive. I came back. This was recorded a week ago today. I just came back from the USCCA Expo, where I was able to connect with a ton of vendors, and we will be contacting them for upcoming shows. Some of these vendors include Shadow Systems, HK, Glock, EAA, Nextbelt, Guardian Training, Staccato, Bursa, Century Arms or Canic, Mossberg, Taser, Beretta, Galco, Free State Firearms, that'll be an interesting one, Armed and Feminine, IDPA, Bond Arms, Gun Owners of America, a knife vendor, Hoffner Knives, he's got some cool stuff. JM4 Tactical, Project Appleseed, an attorney, and Ruger. So that's going to be our content in the next several months. I'm very excited to reach out and connect and interview with these people, and I think you'll be very, very happy as well. That's why I'm elated. I made some great contacts. Let me tell you why I'm upset, why I am pissed off. A little bit more, and you should be too, although I'm not telling you what to do. Just over a week ago, New Mexico's governor suspended the right to bear arms, saying that the Second Amendment is not absolute. And I'm going to get into the story in a moment. The governor's name is Michelle Grisham. She's the 32nd governor of New Mexico, Democratic Party. She previously was the U.S. representative for New Mexico's 1st Congressional District from 2013 to 2019. Let's go into why she did what she did, and then we'll have a little bit of opinion on it. She did it under the guise of a public health emergency order that suspends the right to bear arms in Albuquerque and surrounding Bernalillo County. I probably didn't say that right. So the order is only for 30 days, but it can be renewed and applies to concealed and open carry of firearms on public property, with exceptions for police officers and security. She said, citizens with permits to carry firearms are free to possess their weapons on private property, such as a gun range or a gun store, provided they transport the item in a locked box, use a trigger lock, or other mechanism that renders the gun incapable of being fired. The order covers cities and counties averaging 1,000 or more violent crimes per 1,000 residents since 2021. At least her decision is data-based, not emotion-based. There was a recent shooting death of a 13-year-old girl on July 28th, a 5-year-old girl on August 14th, and an 11-year-old boy on September 6th. And we hope that the families find peace as they put their lives back together. So that is always a tragedy. It is never fun. And she basically not violated. Yeah, she did. She violated the Constitution by saying she welcomes a debate and fight about making New Mexicans safer. Subsequent to that gubernatorial order, the National Association for Gun Rights, along with a member who lives in Albuquerque, is suing in federal court, arguing that her order flies in the face of the 2022 Bruin decision. And that decision overturned New York's sweeping limits on public possession of firearms, and I'm hoping this gets fast-tracked up the court system. The lawsuit basically says that the carry ban is presumptively unconstitutional because the plain text of the Second Amendment covers public possession of guns for self-defense, and the state is presumption because the regulation is not consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. The order clearly and unambiguously violates the Second Amendment protection of the right to bear arms and shall not be infringed. And there's a second, deprives law-abiding gun owners of their only means of self-defense from criminal attack while in public. The New Mexico Sports Association, which is a chapter of the NRA, says it's planned to join the two other lawsuits. If someone violates this, it's a fine of $5,000 per violation. It's a lot of money. The governor is unfazed by these concerns. The purpose is to create a cooling off period where we figure out how we can better address public safety and gun violence. There's that word, gun violence. As an anti-violence specialist, I don't care if it's a violence by a gun. I don't care if it's violence by a knife. I am against it. I am against violence. But here we get into the motion, gun violence. You know, if someone stabbed someone with a knife, would you call them an attacker? Would you call them a murderer? Or would you call them a knife man or a knife person? If someone is drunk driving, do you call them a Bud Light person? Do you call them a tequila person? No. Do you call the car a drunk car, the object? No, you don't. I don't know. That's just my soapbox. So a reporter did ask the governor whether her order was consistent with her oath to uphold the Constitution. Great question. And she said, no constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. What a liar. Wow, I almost said something else in the radio. So she has emergency powers, and she says gun violence is an epidemic, therefore it's an emergency. So in her own little twisted view, she has banned guns. I can just see something like that happening with Governor Pritzker and him using it as a platform when he allegedly, supposedly runs for president of the United States. And that greatly concerns me on several levels. First of all, it concerns me about my ability to defend myself. Now, if you guys know me, I'm old. I am not in shape. That's really what I have to do. Also, I'm a cancer patient. I'm a diabetic patient. I don't have a thyroid. I cannot get in a long, drawn-out fist fight with someone who's accosting me. Firearm and less lethal type stuff like a taser, pepper spray are my options because I can't get into a long, drawn-out fight with someone. And the disparity of force against me would be great. And I fear that would be the case for people who are a little bit older. I have one student and he has one arm. He has a prosthetic arm, a congenital birth defect. Seriously, if this happens in Illinois, I will not be happy from a constitutional perspective. And also my business is based upon firearms. I really, really hope that Governor J.B. Pritzker does not follow suit. But I'm sure that they have all networked together, and this may be an individual effort. It may be a coordinated effort. I'm not putting my tinfoil hat on. However, this is not good. I've always said that if an elected official obviously enacts a law, or in this case, an executive order, and that order or law is clearly unconstitutional, I think they should give up their seat. They are not representing the country. They are not representing the Constitution. They are bastardizing the Constitution. They are taking their own individual opinion and twisting the Constitution around. What's the difference between them and me? Well, first of all, I don't make rules for society. I am a radio host, I'm an author, I'm a thought leader, but I'm not a policymaker. The opposite of that is if I was elected and I'm a governor and I give an executive order, okay, every household must have a gun, just like I believe it's Switzerland in Europe. Do you think that the anti-gunners would be all up in arms because I don't have the authority to do that? But I would say it's in the Second Amendment. Right to bear arms shall not be restricted. I'm encouraging people, I'm ordering people to have firearms in their house. And that's the egregious opposite. Look, I know guns are not for everyone. There are people who are not qualified to have a firearm based upon mental health background, based upon criminal background, based upon orders of protection, and there's other disqualifying factors, like cannot renounce your U.S. citizenship, you can't be subject to an active order of protection or restraining order, and there's a whole litany of disqualifying statements. So there you have it, folks. I am elated about some of the upcoming content. And next week, wow, it's going to be a great episode. I'm going to tease it right now. I have an interview with Wayne Messmer. Who is Wayne Messmer? If you've ever gone to a Chicago Wolves game or a smattering of Cubs, White Sox, Bears all over the country, he is the national anthem guy. And when I was a criminal justice student in college in the early 90s, he sang at the Blackhawks game, went to a bar, left the bar, and an offender shot him in the throat. Not only did he survive, he bounced back, and 6 months later, he was singing the national anthem again. He has got a fantastic story of difficult times, perseverance, overcoming what has been put in front of him, and forgiveness. Why am I having it next week? Well, next weekend, and I'll get into this at the beginning of the next episode, is the Jewish Day of Atonement, where we are sorry for all of the sins and transgressions that we did, not only against the Bible, but against our fellow people. One of those traditions is I will ask my family, if I did anything to offend you, please forgive me. I'll ask my audience the same thing. Up next, we've got Spiro Maglaras. He is a retired Chicago police sergeant who now owns Prairie House Tavern, a restaurant in Buffalo Grove. He's a really neat guy I didn't work with him, but from everything I can surmise, this guy was a great cop. And you're going to hear his story next. Stay tuned. Spiro, thank you for taking the time to talk to our listeners.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Why did you go into law enforcement? What's the background story?
I've always been a bit of an adrenaline junkie as a kid. Always liked to kind of push the envelope a bit. Through high school, I was like a normal teenager, played high school sports. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to go to the military. My folks were kind of old school from Europe. They were kind of a little bit against it. So I decided to attend college, not fly, but I ended up getting my pilot's license when I was in college. I flew for about 4 or 5 years. And then, I don't know, it was kind of the back of my mind, but back when I was trying to be the police, it was very difficult to get in a job. You'd have to have a military background for the suburban departments. You would literally test with thousands of people, and you really didn't have a chance unless you had the military or you had some kind of an in into the department. I tested for Chicago 2 times in my early 20s, and it took the 3rd time to actually get a good enough lottery number to get hired. In the meantime, I was working in the car business, doing something that I really wasn't enjoying, but I was just kind of buying my time until I got to the Chicago Police, and that was actually the place I wanted to be. A lot of policemen could attest to that. A lot of suburban departments lost people to us all the time because they all would get jobs with the other suburban department, and everybody wanted to be called it the real police, and that was being in the CPD.
Very good. There's a whole big story about being the real police, which I will spare our listeners because I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but I totally get it. And Chicago is packed full of action. I know that when everyone starts in police work, actually the vast majority, maybe not everyone, starts in patrol. How often, and I want to get to the specialized assignments, how long were you in patrol for?
Graduated the academy, about 6 months of the academy. And of course, you're in the academy, and the first thing that they tell you when you get out of the academy, I got assigned to the 24th District, which is Rogers Park. The first thing my first FTO told me was, kid, forget everything they told you in the academy. It's all nonsense. I could use a different word, but we're going to keep it clean. It was all nonsense. So like, okay, so, you're a PPO. That's a probational police officer. I started 24th district. You do a cycle on every period. So I started on a third period, which is the evening shift, typically 3 to 11 at the time, or 4 to 12, 4 to midnight. And then you did 3 periods on that. 3 periods were basically, you do a period and a half, so it's like a month and a half. And then you go typically to another shift, which I ended up going on days. Did a month and a half on days with an FTO there, who again teach you not only how to do the job, but they also teach you how to be the police, and actually how to handle the whole thing, and how to handle the newfound power of being the police, and how to go home and turn it off and turn it back on when you get back to work. And then I did my last shift was on midnights, which is the dreaded shift for most policemen. It's a midnight. It was 11 to 7 in the morning at the time when I was there, or a midnight to 8 in the morning. And I did another month and a half there in Rogers Park.
Were you in Rogers Park the majority of your career, or did you move around?
No, so I did my half my probational there. Typically coppers and their end of their probation, the last 3-4 months. At the time, I was a year in probation. Now the officers are there for a year and a half. They send us out to loop traffic. I was not assigned to loop traffic. I was assigned to Interstate 55. I forgot the name of what they keep it named after, the Stevenson. I don't know which one it is. But we were on Archer Avenue. We were directing traffic. So we basically reported at 11 o'clock to a roll call, and then we didn't have to be on our corners to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we worked from 3 to 6. Directing traffic in the middle of the street, rain, snow, cold, hot. We were out there. Kind of gave us the first taste of how the low man of the totem pole did a lot of crazy work. So I did that, and then before my probation was up, I put a letter in the state of Rogers Park, because it was at the time a sort of busy district. It was one of the busier districts in the north side, and most coppers, the majority, wanted to go to busier districts. And I was reassigned to the 20th district, which ended up being the slowest district in Chicago, Mayberry, as most coppers called it. And I was there for about a year and a half. Me and my partner at the time, who I had the same partner for 9.5 years, we both put in for the 15th district, which was typically the west side, where everybody wanted to go, either 11 or 15. We spent one period there. We loved it. It was great. We were having so much fun because we were learning the job the way we wanted to learn it in a really high crime area. And we were both lucky enough to be picked for reassignment to a unit that was called the Targeted Response Unit. Targeted Response Unit was a new concept. It was developed by then Deputy Moyer. It took 60 young coppers and I think it was like 6 fairly young sergeants, and they put us up in a building and over in the south side, gave us marked squad cars in uniform, and our primary job was to basically saturate an area, a box. We called it the box, right? He gave us a box. We go out there and we pull people over for whatever probable cause you can get. I mean, me and my partner, believe it or not, was sounding. There was an ordinance, if you could hear someone's radio over 100 feet away, you could pull them over. At that time, you have to secure the car in order to transport it, and that's where we got all our drugs and guns out of the cars. And you did 2 things. You took away a car that could be used in the shooting, and you also confiscated a deadly gun and contraband in the process. Everybody had their own strategy, but it was a very successful unit. I was there for 7 years, and I made sergeant out of that unit. In 2010, I made sergeant, and the unit survived to 2012. The true story is it was basically disbanded when then Mayor Rahm Emanuel told everybody in his campaign that he was going to put 300 officers back on the streets. Well, in reality, there was no 300 officers to be put back, so he demobilized. They disbanded a very aggressive unit that made very good arrests that literally shut down crime. And let me give you an example. In the 7.5 years I was in TRU, the whole point is how politics go into the department, Chicago Police Department. He made a promise to his constituents that he was going to put policemen back on the street. Unless he took them out of positions, office positions, he had no one to put back on the street. So he basically disbanded a very good aggressive unit that was making quality arrests shutting down areas, open drug sales. And for an example, I was there for 7 years. No one ever got shot in the box that TRU was assigned in. No one across the street from the box, maybe, but never in the assigned box, because we were there very visibly pulling people over and arresting people. A week into that box, all crime had disappeared because they knew we wwere there. So Rahm Emanuel disbanded the targeted response unit and put those officers back in the south side of Chicago, even though they lived in the north side. And some of them were stuck there for years because they weren't allowed to bid out of those districts because there were no bid openings to come north again. So two bad things happened. You just made a very aggressive unit with very aggressive policemen very upset. And those officers probably never went back to being the police that they were because they probably all felt slighted. So targeted response unit lasted till 2011. I made sergeant in 2010. I was lucky because I was predominantly in the south side and west side ghettos. I was lucky enough to be taken out for a while and put into the 18th district in Gold Coast area, which in itself was another challenge because now I'd have to learn how to talk to people differently. Things that were done, policing that was done in the higher crime areas could not be done in the Gold Coast area. It was a challenge for me. I spent 4 months in patrol at midnights, which I could not stand because midnights are tough for everybody. But it got me learning. It taught me how to learn how to deal with people that were intoxicated. Some of these people were very educated, but like I would tell them, you drink yourself stupid. It was harder to deal with them because you had to have them look at reason, and it was hard for somebody that's drunk to see reason. So I did that for 4 months. I was lucky enough to get on the third watch. I was there for a month, and really lucky because I got my first tactical response team in the 18th district, literally 5 months after I was promoted to sergeant. So tactical teams, for those who don't know it, is every district has 3 tactical teams assigned to it, meaning you're an 18th district officer, but you're taken from the watch, mostly the more aggressive officers, and put into a TAC team. TAC teams work 1 day shift for a period, which is roughly a month, evening for roughly a month again, and then the hard part was your third period, you worked 2 days, 2 nights. So you'd actually go to work and work 2 day shifts, and then you'd work 2 night shifts. Being the police is not easy, especially if you have a family, because as you can see, you're telling your wife, yeah, I'm working these 2 days. These days are not. I'm working nights. It was very difficult on marriages, and that's why police have a high divorce rate. For that reason, I think, believe it or not, it's because of the different hours and the way they keep changing them. While in the TAC team, we were mostly in charge of doing undercover stuff in the district. Burglaries, car thefts, carjackings. I was lucky enough to have 4 guys that were on the prostitution team, which taught me a lot of how these guys went about catching these prostitutes that were in a lot of these hotels. Did that with them almost every night because they were very good at it, and I learned a lot from doing it with them. But we were basically the more aggressive officers. I was doing that for roughly probably 2 years. While I was there, the downtown, I forgot the name of it, when they come in, they grab all the stuff. When all these teams were coming from the south side, they were going into the stores.
Like flash mobs?
The flash mob started. They actually started when I was in the 18th district. We didn't know how to go about it. I think the first couple times it happened, we arrested everybody. We were able to round everybody up and put them in jail. But of course, it didn't look good on TV, so we weren't allowed to do it anymore. But flash mob started when I was in the 18th district. It would happen every Friday and Saturday night. It was pretty ridiculous. We'd have people on the lakefront getting punched because they were riding their bikes in the bike path, and people wouldn't move. These kids wouldn't move out of their way. So that was difficult to deal with as the police. Then I was lucky enough to go to I'll go to my specialized units real quick as a sergeant. I was lucky enough to go into the vice control section. There I was in charge of all criminal activity that were being done in a business. So my licensing team would go out when we would get complaints about, let's say, a bar was acting like there was prostitution going on in the bar. So we would go undercover and basically act like patrons to try to get to see if there in fact was prostitution, or if they were selling drugs. And we would do very detailed reports and try to revoking those people's licenses and making arrests. I did that while also covering their minor team. We had a team there would send a minor into bars and liquor stores trying to buy liquor. That minor would go in and try to purchase, and if they did purchase, we would go in there and we would inventory the liquor, and then we would take the liquor and then we would write the establishment up for selling to a minor. I did that. We also was involved in reverse stings, prostitution stings on the street, Operation Angel, where we would put undercover female officers on the street, acting as prostitutes. And then one of the other things that we were always involved with was the FBI. We would do a mission done throughout the United States of catching minors in prostitution. I think we used to come in second every year to Las Vegas in catching minors. I was in Vice for a couple of years, I think 2.5 or 3 years close, and I left and took over. I probably had the most fun of my life was the gang enforcement team I took over. I was there for roughly 7.5 years.
I have a couple of questions based upon what you said.
Yeah.
One thing that I think you left out was when you were talking about when you were new on the job and you were doing traffic control, and whether it was rain or snow, you forgot to say, or stupidity.
Yes.
Never underestimate the intelligence of people until you do traffic control.
Yes.
And people don't answer or don't follow your direction. I've done plenty of traffic control. It is frustrating.
Oh, I quit. Like one of my old partners, God rest his soul, he passed away, one of my old left heels. He would say, common sense, not so common, right? That's pretty much one of our things we'd always say is, it's not common.
Very true. And people have a perception of what police officers do. As a sergeant, can you explain any additional duties that you had, management duties, that type of thing, or other things that maybe the general public don't really understand or know?
So we're the frontline managers on the street, right? So the POs are, let's say, the soldiers, and we were the frontline manager. We were the ones who were supposed to take what our lieutenants took from the deputies, in most cases, and implement their strategies on the street. So it was our job to make sure that what the hierarchy of our department, which most times was very diluted, and we really did not, and most of it we used to say it was a dog and pony show, right? And I'll give you an example of that because most of your listeners wouldn't know this. But we were there to make sure we implemented the strategies that our hierarchy in our department said were going to work for that weekend.
When we return, we will be continuing the conversation with Spiro Maglaras, retired sergeant from the Chicago Police Department. And also, just as a reminder, I'd stay out of New Mexico for a little while. They really don't honor the Illinois permit, but at the same time, that governor has successfully disarmed law-abiding citizens in favor of criminals. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.